Hey guys, Dr. Ken here. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about a concept that I feel like a lot of people want to believe that they understand, but they either actually don't, or they don't know how to apply that knowledge to their own health and fitness. And that is the difference between exercise and training. So if you've been around gym culture for long enough, you've probably at one point or another heard some pompous gym goer say, "I don't work out, I train." But what does that even actually mean? And if you ask that individual, they may not even know themselves. So, to introduce the topic, here's something to muse over. All training is exercise, but not all exercise is training. What does that even mean? That is one of the questions that I wanted to answer today, and by the end of this video, you will understand why it's important to make that distinction. I also wanted to go over some concepts that have a bit more of a practical application so that you can start to transform your own exercise and workouts into training if appropriate. So the first thing that we need to do is establish some definitions. What is exercise and what is training? Exercise is generalized physical activity that enhances or maintains some aspect of health or fitness. And aspects of health and fitness could be strength, cardiovascular fitness, flexibility, etc. It's very general and very generic. Training, on the other hand, implies some sort of end goal for the exercise. It is goal-oriented exercise to improve specific aspects of fitness or skills. And the key here is specificity. And if we wanted to add another layer or dimension to this, we could say that training is goal-oriented exercise that is often structured and organized by individual phases that may address different skills or aspects of fitness. That's just kind of my own definition that I just kind of pulled out of my head. So we're already seeing some distinctions emerge. Are you performing exercise just for the sake of exercise, or are you training to be able to perform a very specific task under very specific conditions? Let me illustrate this with an example. There was one day that I was invited to join in on a workout while I was visiting family out of town. And this individual was very excited about the workout. He told me that his trainer was new, but was excellent. And since I had no solid plans of lifting that week, I happily obliged. So we got to the gym, and after we warmed up, the trainer had us start with lunges. Great. Then he had us pick up medicine balls, and we did more lunges. Then he had us drop those medicine balls, and we did more lunges. And in the end, so we basically just did lunges for an entire hour. Now we could ask ourselves, what did we accomplish? What did we get better at? Not to say that it wasn't a good workout, because it was. I was very tired and worked out by the end of it. Besides getting better at lunges, there wasn't really any goal that we worked towards. Unless we were trying to specifically get better at lunging for an hour straight, we didn't train. We simply just worked out and exercised. So we can already see that not all types of activities or exercise is going to benefit a high-level football player, a basketball player, or even a powerlifter. Each of these individuals encounter very specific tasks and demands that are distinct from other types of physical activity. And the exercise that each of those athletes will choose needs to address very specific needs. And this hits on a concept in strength and conditioning and sports medicine called the principle of specificity. In short, we will adapt to specifically imposed demands. So, to recap this section, exercise is generalized physical activity. Training is goal-oriented and specific exercise. Now let's talk a little bit about why this is important. Now, none of this is to say that training is always superior to exercise, or that those who do in fact train are doing something better than those who simply exercise. When there isn't an end goal to work towards, we will often slide closer and closer to the realm of exercise rather than training. And on top of that, some people just don't care or have a current goal. And in this case, general and unstructured physical activity is perfectly acceptable. However, when there is an end goal in mind, we need to drastically shift not only the practical methods that we use for exercise, but also our mindset of why we're doing what we're doing in our training. So everything that we do in our training must support the end goal, and our training must address as many specific aspects of the sport or activity as possible. We can't be wasting our time and energy on things that are not helping us work towards the goals. So, for example, spending a lot of time on isolated soleus training will probably not help a powerlifter lift more weight on the squat, bench press, or the deadlift, but it might help a track athlete with their running. We also can't neglect any of our goals. So for example, the classic football player who only ever lifts weights and neglects their conditioning, their agility, and skill work. Now, if you've ever worked with a personal trainer, or if you are a personal trainer, you've probably encountered the question, what are your goals? And a good trainer will ask about specific aspects of those goals and create a program structured to support those goals. But often I see a lot of people just placed on the same cookie cutter program that really doesn't address anything in particular. If you spend all of your time doing things that don't actually support your goals, then you won't get any closer to those goals. And this is why the distinction between training and exercise becomes important. Once you understand the difference between training and exercise, you will now have a good idea of why you're doing the things that you do during your workout sessions. So now that we've identified why it's important to make the distinction between training and exercise, let's dive a little bit more specifically into the mental aspect of training and the more practical application. As far as mindset goes, as you approach your training, you should now have a good idea of why you're doing very specific exercises at specific intensities, at specific volumes, and whether or not it's truly contributing to your end goal. And you need to question and audit basically everything in your program and really see if it's necessary, because unnecessary things impact training economy. Basically, training economy is what you're doing with your biological resources. We only have a finite ability to recover from certain things. Are you wasting that energy on unnecessary things? Now, keep in mind that we're really only talking about the differences between training and exercise here. Periodization is a completely different topic that will require its own video. Now, let's dive into the practical application of all of this knowledge. We now know that training at its core is basically just goal-oriented exercise. So the first step that we need to take is define that goal. Let's go over two different scenarios. We'll first start with a powerlifter. Powerlifter, in its most basic definition, is a sport where individuals compete in lifting the most weight that they can in a single repetition on the squat, bench press, and deadlift. So the task here is to become really, really good at lifting as much weight as you can in a single focused effort on each of those exercises. Let's focus on the squat for this example. So now that we've identified the goal, we can ask ourselves, what will improve an individual's ability to squat, and what does it take to squat a lot of weight? Now, of course, this is going to vary to some degree based on the athlete's experience and training age, but let's just think in general terms. In order to squat big numbers, you need strong legs, strong hips, a strong low back, a strong core, strong upper back, and impeccable technique. Basically, you just need a really, really strong person. Let's break it down into specific tasks and exercises. Squatting will, of course, improve an individual's ability to squat. We also need a very strong low back. Exercises such as good mornings, deadlifts of all variations, back raises, reverse hypers, and pull-throughs will all help with the squat. We also need strong hips. All of those aforementioned exercises will be helpful, but we could also bring in hip thrusts if the glutes are a particular weak point. We also need a very strong core. Now, all of the aforementioned exercises will be helpful, but we can also bring in items such as leg raises, planks, farmer carries, and ab wheels to give the core more work if it's also a particular weak spot. We also need a very strong upper back. Good mornings, deadlifts variations, and training for the upper body will cover this area. Now, of course, we also need very strong legs. Other squatting variations such as front squats and box squats will help here, as well as split squats, lunges, leg presses, and even isolation exercises such as leg extensions and hamstring curls, especially if those areas are particular weak spots. We could also bring in other elements of fitness such as power. Power is an individual's ability to express force quickly, and power will always help absolute strength. Jumps and explosive exercises will be helpful here. And finally, we need impeccable technique. Each session, every single repetition of the squat needs to be seen as focused technical practice. So now that we've identified a couple of things that can help, what are some things that won't help? Calf training, unless your ankles are so weak that you can't hold yourself up, will probably not help you squat more weight. And spending a lot of your time and energy doing metcons and long distance running will also probably not help your squat. Now, there is something to be said about general fitness and general physical preparedness, but generally, spending a lot of your time on metcons and long distance running is a failure to prioritize. We could also think back to the example of me doing lunges for an hour. That's probably not going to help me raise my 1 rep max. And doing weird exercises on a Bosu ball, I'm willing to bet, is not going to help out your squat. Now, I hope you're starting to understand how the organization of your exercises and what you choose to do during your workouts affects the end goal of all of your efforts. So let's move on to a little bit more of an advanced example, a football player, and we're talking American football here. What are some elements from that sport that we need to be successful in football? Generally, but depending on the position, we need an athlete who is strong, fast, agile, powerful, has excellent conditioning, and also possesses the skills of their position. And it's also generally favorable to be bigger as long as it doesn't hurt their athleticism. So how can we structure a football player's training to improve these elements? So we need someone who is strong. Work in the weight room is an absolute must, and we could use our example of the powerlifter to guide our decision making of what to do in the weight room. We also need someone who is fast and agile. So while the general work in the weight room will also help here, we could also think in more sophisticated ways. What does it take to make someone run faster, be more agile, and jump higher? So we need to improve absolute strength. The weight room work will help address this. Remember that in general, a stronger athlete is a faster athlete. We also need to address speed strength. So plyometrics such as all jumping variations can help here. And if they have the technique and capacity, the clean and jerk can also be applied here. Now, how can we make our athletes run faster? If they're not good at running, technical practice and sprint training will help here. However, if they're already really fast and really good at running, more running won't necessarily make them faster. And this is where some specific knowledge will come into play. So for example, a vertical jump is actually a really good way to gauge whether or not someone's top speed of running is actually improving. So we could do things that will improve their ability to jump, which will also translate to their ability to run as well. Other things that will help with running can include sled work, get off drills, and of course, sprint training. Now, in the same theme as the previous point, we also need someone who is in really, really good condition to perform relatively short bouts of extremely high intensity physical activity. And when we put it into those terms, you can start to understand that long duration, low intensity cardio, such as jogging for an hour, is probably not going to be as effective as sprint interval training or high intensity interval training. And finally, they need to have the skills for their specific position, and this will likely be accomplished with specific training with their coach. Now, those were relatively quick and general examples of how to approach training for a powerlifter and a football player, and there's a lot more depth that goes into it, but I'm hoping that the gears are starting to turn in your head about how to apply goal-oriented training to your own health and fitness. Now, an important question to ask here is general exercise, not training, ever appropriate for an athlete or an individual who has specific goals? And the answer here, of course, is yes. And this is going to dive into a little bit of a gray area between exercise and training that relates to periodization. I know that earlier I said this isn't a video about periodization, but let's talk briefly about this concept here. In general, the farther out you are from your contest or sport-specific competition, the more generalized you want your training to be. The closer you get to your competition, the more and more specific you want your training to become. So in the beginning phases of training, you need to first establish a strong foundation of fitness and overall physical preparedness. And this is called General Physical Preparedness, or GPP. And for the sake of brevity, just think of GPP as whether or not you're in shape to get in shape. Are you in shape to tolerate the training program that you're about to undergo? And this is where exercises such as generalized cardio, calisthenics, and to a degree, doing thousands of lunges can actually come into play. An athlete who has a strong base of GPP will tolerate a training program with better results than an individual who does not. And this is why spring ball for football players just tends to look like a bunch of guys working out and just throwing the football around. And this starts to hit a gray area. This generalized exercise is still technically training, it's just not as specific. And for a powerlifter, GPP work may be pushing a sled, doing some cardiovascular conditioning to be able to tolerate the more intense training down the road, or just doing a wider variety of exercises around the gym to get the body into shape for training, so to speak. And this generalized exercise may actually just be doing higher volume training on the main exercises, such as 5 sets of 10. Generally, doing sets of 10 will not necessarily be as effective in improving your 1 rep max, but it will definitely raise your capacity and tolerance for the training that will. And as the sports season or the competition gets closer, this general exercise may start to transform more and more into what we see as training. So there you have it. Let's just recap some of the lessons learned from this video. All training is exercise, but not all exercise is training. Exercise is generalized physical activity that enhances or maintains some aspect of health or fitness. Training is goal-oriented exercise that enhances a specific aspect of fitness, skill, or knowledge. And the difference here is important because it impacts our decision-making process when designing training programs. Remember, if you don't address the specific needs of an athlete, those elements will not get better. And to start applying these lessons in a practical manner, start with the end goal of your training, then make sure that everything that you do in your training is supportive of that goal in some way, shape, or form. Now, of course, you can't just understand the differences between exercise and training and think you're a coach. There's a lot of very specific skills and knowledge to manage an athlete, such as periodization, training economy, fatigue management, and of course, technical knowledge of exercise, all of which I want to talk about at some point in the future. Anyways, I hope that you learned something from this video. I definitely want to do more of this in the future, just spreading knowledge and starting discussions about our health and fitness. If you enjoy this topic, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, follow me on Instagram, and if you would like further reading on this topic, I'll have some titles in the description below. I'll also link my blog, thefitethos.com, where I try to regularly just post about fitness, health, strength, and conditioning, things of those topics. Not always possible with this hectic schedule of mine. Anyways, thank you so much for watching or listening. Hope to see you in the next one.